identity. Empty world filled with people doubting everything. Empty church searching for identity. Empty heart seeking something to hold on to. An empty life scared to turn to you. I am not afraid to say that Jesus is my Savior. I am not afraid to say He changed my life. I'm not afraid because He holds forever. I am not afraid. I am not afraid. Make me Lord, fill me with your fire. Fill the world with people seeking your name, to build a world that will never be the same. And I am not afraid to say that Jesus is my Savior. And I am not afraid to say He changed my life. I'm not afraid because He holds forever.
Well, let's roll this thing. Can you hear me? Welcome to St. Paul's United Methodist Church here in Raymore, Missouri. We are pleased to sponsor this event, this presentation to the Raymore community with our facilities and our refreshments. And based what we're all here for, this may sound like a joke, but I am serious. If you can't hear me, raise your hand. Good, we don't need to turn it up. My name's Dick Heim. I'm one of the many servants here at St. Paul's United Methodist, and I want to welcome you to this presentation provided by the Hearing Loss Education Mission. A person with hearing aid or with hearing loss like myself is excited about this because I want to see and hear what they have to bring for me that can help me in my struggles with being able to understand conversation. You'll get to meet Mel and Tracy shortly, but before we start, if you don't mind, I'd like to thank the Lord for all of us gathered here and this place in a short prayer. Father, thank you for this day in your kingdom. Please bless those who are gathered in your house to hear words and see acts of encouragement and help from the presenters, your servants. Thank you for a country and a community that allows us to gather freely like this without persecution, to learn and fellowship. Bless us as we travel away from this place and help us share what we learn effectively with others. In Jesus' name, amen. Few housekeeping details. Now I can identify almost everybody in the crowd, but just as a reminder that in case the fire alarm sounds or the strobe light flashes, the quickest way out of this room is those two exits at that side, your right side. Don't go out the way you came in. Go out that way. That way, it doesn't matter where the fire is, you will be away from it. There is a short flight of stairs out that door, but they're easy to manage. We have safety team members in the room. They're trained in first aid and trauma injuries, as well as physical force capabilities in case we have violent intruders. But it's highly unlikely that any event of that kind will happen. But in case it does, please follow the safety team's instructions unquestionably. Restrooms are located in the lobby, what us old people call the narthex, and that's out those doors to your right where you came in. And if you go out during the presentation, you can get out either door. But when you re-enter, you will need to re-enter back through the back double doors, because after the presentation starts, you can't re-enter through this door as a courtesy to the presenter and for safety reasons. We would normally ask that you hold your questions until the end of the seminar. And at that point, with this number of people, Mel will probably take the microphone to you and ask you to speak your question into the microphone so that everybody has a chance to hear the question. I'll leave that up to him. He may just want to get down to where he can hear you and then repeat the question, but I'll leave that up to Mel. He knows what he's doing in this program. After the presentation, we'll have refreshments out in the lobby. If you'd like to talk with each other, talk with Mel, talk with Tracy, ask your questions personally face-to-face, they will be available after the presentation. Finally, these folks truly do this as a mission. They do not charge anything and they don't sell anything. They absorb all of their own travel and lodging expenses personally. So if you're moved by what they are doing and would like to support them in continuing, there is a link on the handout that you will receive at the end of the presentation. Or if you feel like making a donation, you can do that here at St. Paul's today, and we'll be sure that 100% of it goes to the hearing loss education mission. You can put cash or checks in the little envelopes that are in the chair pockets in front of you, except you on the front row. There are no chair pockets in front of you. You can just reach over the back and get one. If you're going to put cash or a check in there, do that. Make the check payable to St. Paul's United Methodist or UMC and put in the memo line hearing loss. Obligations to donate do not exist, but if you feel so moved, we're happy to collect for you. So now, without further ado, let me introduce your presenter, who will tell you all about his experience with adult hearing loss and the hearing loss education mission, Mr. Mel Volan. Mel?
Thank you, Dick, and thanks for having us here. Tracy and I are very excited to be here. First off, I'd like to point out to you a couple of things. If you haven't assumed so already, I have hearing loss. I can't hear very well. So if and when you have questions, comments, or suggestions, I would love to hear those questions, comments, and suggestions. That helps me. The feedback that you give me helps me. Second of all, we're all friends here. We're here because either we have hearing loss or we know someone that has hearing loss. We're all here together. The last thing I'd like to mention is that most of my groups are exactly the same size. Oftentimes, the folks that sponsor us expect a larger group, but this is the size group that we normally get, and this is great because we can interact with each other. We have questions, we have concerns, we want to express ourselves, we want to affirm what we're experiencing or what our loved one is experiencing, and that's all good because normally when we go out to the world, we're a little outnumbered. And it's difficult to say, I'm sorry, I have hearing loss. Could you repeat that for me, please? Or, you know. How many people out of the group we have here today are willing to confess in front of the others that they at least have some small amount of hearing loss? Excellent, thank you. This presentation is for you. How many people here today either live with someone or know someone very well that has hearing loss and goes, huh, what, huh, I didn't hear you? How many people might fall into that category? Well, this hearing loss conversation is for you too, because those of us with hearing loss aren't the only ones that have difficulty with this whole subject. Those of us we care about and love, those of us we work with, those of us we interact with, all experience these same problems. Now, I've been handed this microphone that I don't usually use. Sometimes I talk like this. I go out into the audience and we sit around. Sometimes there's a table. Sometimes there's just a few chairs and a board that I can write on today. We have that, but sometimes there's that. And I'm going to ask you as an audience, some of whom have already said that you have hearing loss, your best estimate. Would you prefer to have me talk like this today and be standing right here? Or if you like, I can stay up here on the podium and I can speak into the microphone. Does anybody have a preference one way or the other? How many people say microphone? How many people say just stand down here and talk like a person without a microphone? Boy, that's a tough call because it's about even. On the microphone, or if you're not hearing me because, well, if you're not hearing me because it's difficult, you have to let me know.
Since the sun has gone down, would it be easier if these people moved over to this side? So you're just on.
Oh, that's true. That's true. And either that or kind of move together.
We can do
One of
that.
the things I talk about in my presentation is that if we have hearing loss, our normal listening ability is 3 to 6 feet. Oh, that's fine. Oh, we jump from the other side, don't we? Thank you. So usually I mention, that if you have cell phones or other digital kind of devices, I'd like you to turn those off because that makes a better experience for all of us. Sometimes you get spam or a message from somebody you're not expecting, that kind of thing. If you have comments or questions, because we have a small group, you're welcome to raise your hand, interject, especially suggestions. I'm still new at this. I've only been doing this for a few months. If you have some suggestions, I'd love to hear them. Communication. Right now, all of us, each of us, is communicating. I'm attempting to communicate to you through use of my voice. Contrary to what some people expect, just because my mouth is moving doesn't mean that the ears are working. But I'm trying to communicate mostly through my voice, but I'm also communicating through use of nonverbal methods. Body language, my hand and body movements, eye contact. You're all communicating to me through the same methods. I'm receiving communication from you, even if you're not intending to do so, because communication is part of all of this. Communication can be achieved the same way through the written word. It can be digitally. We have our new world now with computers, cell phones, iPads, televisions, all kinds of things, or the written word on paper, the old-fashioned way. I have handouts that are old-fashioned on paper. I have notes that I'll follow today to try to keep from getting too far off track. Communication is a human need. It's the basis for relationship building. It's a human right. And if you have hearing loss, communication is really the thing that we miss the most. Our society, regrettably, has some difficulty with this. You see, if we have hearing loss, we're living in a hearing world, and most of the people we live with depend on our ears and our mouth for communication. But we're trying to find some other ways to coexist. We're a little outnumbered. But we're not as outnumbered as we used to be. You see, if you have hearing loss, or if you have no hearing at all, you're in a larger group of people than you realize. 1 in 6 Americans has hearing loss, some measurable amount of hearing loss. That's a large number. Around here, in this room today, it's a bigger number than that. It's a bigger fraction of that. But when your church gets together here in the congregation, if you think about it, come next Sunday and take a look around, 1 in 6 people in this room have hearing loss. And 50% of them are under the age of 55. They have hearing loss. Most of them just don't know it. And the number's growing. Some doctors and audiologists believe that it's an epidemic because it's growing so fast. Hearing loss is the world's largest disability. We have lots of company, those of us that have hearing loss. And those of us that live with someone who has hearing loss, you have lots of company too. But as I said, our world doesn't really realize how much hearing loss is out there, our country in particular. Insurance companies don't cover hearing aids in most instances. Medicaid covers hearing aids. Affordable Care Act covers hearing aids if you're under the age of 18. The rest of us, if we need hearing aids, kind of out of luck. If you have a broken arm, we give you a cast. If you have a broken leg, or if you can't walk, we give you a wheelchair. But if you can't hear, you're kind of out of luck. They won't help us. That's one of the reasons people like me don't believe they have hearing loss, even when somebody tells us that we do. I was in my 20s the first time somebody told me that I had hearing loss. I applied for a government job. I passed the test for the job. It was for air traffic controller. I got through the interview. I was tentatively hired, and I failed my physical exam. They claimed that I failed my hearing test. I was 28. I thought it was hogwash. I blew them off. I said, never mind, you guys don't know what you're talking about. 15 years later, I was a music teacher in a public school. And we had screening for teachers and staff at the school. It was free. I went, took my hearing test. Later that same day, I was called down to the nurse's office. A very concerned looking nurse looked at me and she said, "You need to see a doctor right away. You need some hearing aids." Well, this time, I at least went and got a second opinion. So I went to a hearing aid center. I had my hearing checked. Of course they said I needed hearing aids. I was in my early 40s then, maybe 15 or 16 years ago now. I didn't get very far. They wanted thousands of dollars for these hearing aids. My insurance wouldn't cover it. I didn't have it. So it was years before I finally had hearing aids. Today I'll be telling you about some of my own personal experiences with hearing loss. We'll talk about hearing aids. Some of you may already have hearing aids. Some of you may not have hearing aids, but you're thinking about it. Or maybe someone you live with or someone you know is thinking about hearing aids, and you're thinking about it. I'll offer you some resources for where to turn to for technical kinds of things you can use in your home, technology, assistive listening devices, assistive devices that can help you coexist with the hearing world. I have some resources for you. All these things, by the way, we have handouts that we'll have for you before you leave. There's no way I can cover everything in an hour or so. This will take about an hour, a little over an hour. The resources that I talk about are included in our handouts. Some resources we won't have time for are included in our handouts. Please take one with you. There's phone numbers, contact information, organizations that you can contact. My name is Melville. I'm 58 years old. I'm 5'9" tall. I have brownish hair, brown. I have brown eyes. I like mushrooms and pepperoni on my pizza. Thick crust, please. I know that's not popular out here, I like thick crust. I'm an avid fisherman. And oh yes, by the way, I'm hearing impaired. Hearing loss is part of who I am. It's not good as bad, good or bad. It's not a bad thing, good thing, or something to worry about. It's just part of who I am, and that's okay. It's taken me a long time to reach this point of acceptance. And I still need work on it sometimes. Hearing loss is normal. It's completely normal. It's completely natural. There is nothing to be ashamed of. There's nothing to be ashamed about if you're deaf or hard of hearing. Our society doesn't look at it that way. Sometimes we don't want to tell someone that we can't hear. Sometimes we don't even want to tell our friends or our relatives or our employer that we can't hear. It's normal, it's natural, the rest of the world can get over it. It's okay. As my hearing loss has gotten worse and worse over the years, I've had some changes in my life. It's been a life-changing event, losing my hearing. I have severe hearing loss. I have moderate severe hearing loss. I used to be a music teacher. It cost me my career. It cost us. Our financial situation's been affected, my employment opportunities. All these things are affected if you have hearing loss. You know, if you have hearing loss, you can't do a lot of things that you used to be able to do. So about a year ago or so, my wife Tracy and I were talking, and we thought that maybe somebody out there, there's actually some 48 or 50 million people, 1 in 6 Americans have hearing loss. 1 in 6. So with all those people out there, we thought maybe somebody else has had some difficulties understanding their hearing loss and figuring out how to cope with their hearing loss. So that's what this is about. We're volunteers. We offer our information for free to anyone that asks anytime. I've got a basket out there on the table. If you feel this information is of value, we want to continue helping other people. We travel in our camp. We're in our camp here now. We go from community to community. We talk to small groups just like yourselves. If you want to help the next community down the line, and help us get there and help them, please consider a free will donation. The basket will be back there later. Before I get started, I'd like to cover some basic terms that I use in my presentations. The first one is hearing loss. What does that mean? Hearing loss simply means we have less hearing than normal. Normal is determined by a bunch of doctors somewhere. So we have less hearing than normal, we have hearing loss. Hearing impaired means that we have enough hearing loss that it's difficult to hear. It's a normal and common term used to describe someone with hearing loss. Hard of hearing is a term that's a little bit newer. It's a more warm and fuzzy kind of term. And it's used to describe about the same thing as hearing impaired. Some people like one term better than the other term. Doesn't matter to me. I use both terms interchangeably. You use whichever one you like better. Deaf with a small d, deaf with a small d, means that you can't hear. It's an adjective. Some people have more hearing loss than me, and they're deafer than me. Some people are less deaf than me. I have more hearing than some other people. It's all relative. Each of us has our own audiogram, and we have our own frequency chart. No one has exactly the same hearing loss. We're all unique. But it's a relative term, the word deaf. I should also point out that if someone describes themselves as deaf, that doesn't mean they don't hear anything at all. Some people are born under the category of deaf. Some people who describe themselves as deaf still hear small amounts of sound. They still listen to music. They can still communicate verbally and interact with each other fairly well with the use of hearing aids or cochlear implant, for example. Deaf with a capital D refers to the deaf community or somebody that belongs to the deaf community. People in the deaf community know how to use sign language, and they communicate primarily with only sign language. If you're a hearing person, someone with normal hearing, and you know and have relationships with people in the deaf community, and you know sign language, usually they consider you part of the deaf community at that point, even though you're a hearing person. Late deafening. Late deafening means we were born with normal hearing, but now we have less. Sometime between day one and today, we lost some or all of our hearing. I'm a late deafened person. The focus of my presentation today is on late deafened adults because that's what I understand the best, and that's the category that most people belong to. ADA, you may all be familiar with that, or maybe you may not. Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. That act provides protections and legal rights to anyone with disabilities. But with regard to hearing loss, that allows us equal access to communication. Equal access to communication. That goes, if we go to any public event. Churches are exempt from the ADA. If we go to a public event, they have to give us equal access. Movie theaters, typical example, movie theaters. They have to have some kind of technology for us if we go there, and that's covered by the ADA. There's many potential consequences to having hearing loss. More than I can talk about today. The problem with hearing loss is that most of us are late deafened. We were born with normal hearing. Consequently, if I'm an example, my mouth goes forever, but my ears don't work. You can't see hearing loss. If I came in here in a wheelchair, you say, oh, I must be disabled. If I walk in here and you didn't know me from Adam, you would assume, just as I do. I do the same thing. When I meet someone, I know there's a 5 out of 6 chance that he or she can hear normally, and I assume they can hear. When they look at me, they assume I can hear. Then when I tell them I can't hear, they still don't believe me or they forget me. They still don't know I can't hear. And I'm sure some of you have been through that same kind of experience. One of the biggest consequences, the one that's most extreme, I think, is misunderstandings. We talked about this a little bit earlier today. You don't know what you don't know. There's an old joke about hearing loss. A man tells his doctor that he thinks his wife may have hearing loss. His doctor suggests to him that he try this test to find out for sure. The doctor says, go home. When your wife is washing dishes, stand 15 feet behind her and ask her a question. So the man does it. He goes home, stands 15 feet behind his wife, and he says, honey, what's for supper? No response. So he moves 10 feet closer. No response. So he moves to 5 feet behind her, and he asks the same question again. Still nothing. So finally, he moves up right behind his wife, and he says, honey, what's for dinner? And the wife replies, for the 4th time, I said chicken. If we have hearing loss, we can probably all relate to this. You just don't know what you don't know. You never know for sure. If you have hearing loss, you never know for sure if you've heard the other person correctly. You never know. And they never know for sure either. Misunderstandings lead to embarrassment. misunderstandings can lead to arguments, and they have when they do. I'd say that that's probably the thing that affects me the most with hearing loss. If you have hearing loss, you constantly are asking other people to repeat themselves. What? Say that again. I didn't get that. Could you? And, you know, it's normal for us, but it's exhausting for us. It's tiring. And you know what? It's tiring for the other person, too. The person that we live with, or the person that we're working with. It's tiring for both. And frankly, sometimes, especially strangers, they don't take it very well. They're going to say something that sounds like, well, like I told you before, or like I said earlier. You know, and sometimes it's even after you told them that you have hearing loss. It's just the way it is. It's normal. And of course, if you have hearing loss, you're going to miss some sounds. Some of the ones I miss: crickets, birds chirping, leaves rustling. I was going to say the wind, but you know, if you have hearing aids, you sort of hear the wind. It just sounds different. It's kind of like the wind tone. Running water. I leave the water running at home all the time. I leave the water running all the time at home because I can't hear it. So I turn it on, I wash the dishes, I wash my hands, whatever, and I walk away. I forget to watch it. The water's on. There's a lot of things you're not going to hear if you have hearing loss. We don't hear alarm clocks. We don't hear a knock at the door all the time. Smoke alarms, fire alarms. I had an eerie experience one time. Before I quit teaching school, I used to be a music teacher. I had a work period of about 40 minutes where there was no students in the classroom. It was just me. I had to leave the room for something. I walked out into the hallway, and I discovered that the entire building was empty. Just me. I looked down the hall. There was a flashlight on the wall. After I strained to listen, I could faintly hear the fire alarm was going on. The fire alarm was going off because there was a fire in the building somewhere else. I didn't hear it. Even with my hearing aids, I couldn't hear it. It's just one of those things. You don't know what you can't hear all the time. So safety issues are a problem sometimes if you have hearing loss. And there are some other issues that can be more severe for us that have hearing loss. Studies now show a link between hearing loss and depression. Studies show a link between hearing loss and dementia. And there's not a conclusive amount of studies yet, but some studies show a link between hearing loss and gradual loss of cognitive ability. That hasn't been proven yet. That's a suspected item at this time. So you want to watch out for those kinds of things. Hearing loss can lead us to social problems with our family, our friends, our coworkers, anyone we interact with regularly. Some people with hearing loss turn into complete shut-ins. We don't leave the house. My father has severe hearing loss. Probably one of the reasons I have some hearing loss. By the time he was living by himself, the last 15 or 20 or so years of his life, he never left the house. Because, let's face it, if you have hearing loss, there's some things that are just so frustrating. Sometimes you figure it's just not worth it, and you just don't bother going. At least it is for me. Sometimes, at least at this point. My work life was getting more and more frustrating. Year after year after year. But you see, I always thought it was normal. It was kind of like the fable about the frog and the boiling water. You know, where the frog is in cold water, then they heat the water, and eventually the frog boils to death because he doesn't know the water's getting hotter. My hearing loss was so gradual, I just never knew it was happening. I had no idea how much hearing loss I had. I had no idea that I was still losing my hearing. I didn't understand why it was becoming so difficult to control and manage my classroom. I didn't understand why it was becoming difficult to do a lot of other things. Those of us with hearing loss, things that shouldn't be difficult, sometimes they just turn into something that's difficult. And they won't go away. We just have to get used to it. But sometimes we don't know why, because it happens so gradually. And I found out later, after I did some research, this is typical. Most of us with hearing loss don't know about it because it happens so gradually. Most of us don't know we have hearing loss until it's so extreme that we have to go get hearing aids and we have to make some other changes in our life. We just don't know it. It's normal. If that ever happened to you, it's normal. So, I was so unaware that I had hearing loss. I couldn't see it. I looked in the mirror, I didn't see it in me. It happened so gradually. And on top of that, I did not know how to recognize hearing loss because we're not taught that in our society. Nobody taught us in school how to recognize somebody that might have hearing loss. So let's talk about some of the classic signs of hearing loss. If you think you might have hearing loss, or if somebody you know thinks they may have hearing loss, ask these questions and ask yourself these questions. The first one is, and oh, by the way, these are all on the list. We have a handout. When you leave today, if you want to take the handout with you, this list I'm going to go over with you is all on that handout we'll have. Do you have trouble hearing on the telephone? It happened to me for years. You strain to understand conversations. Everyone else can understand, but you're not quite getting it. Do you have trouble hearing two people talk at the same time? Do you have trouble hearing in a noisy background? Has anybody ever heard that you have the TV or the stereo volume turned up too high? Don't laugh. This is my wife. She's thinking how many years we went through this. Do you find yourself asking people to repeat themselves? Huh? What? Say again? What was that? Do many other people seem to you like they mumble or talk under their breath? I said that for years. He's a mumbler. It was always the other person's fault. Do other people sometimes get annoyed because you don't get it, you're not understanding what they're saying? Huh? What? Yes, sir. You can see the look on their face. You sometimes, and this is embarrassing, for me it is anyway, do you sometimes respond inappropriately when somebody else says? Hi, do you want a glass of water? No, I don't have a daughter. You just, huh? Yeah. And it makes you, well, you know how it makes you look, because that's how you feel when you get done. Do you ever have difficulty understanding people who have a higher pitched voice? Usually this is children or women who have higher pitched voices. Sorry, ladies. In spite of the conversation that's been had at home for years and years and years, sometimes we just can't hear you. It's just the way it is, because if you have a higher pitched voice, most of us lose our higher pitched frequencies sooner. That's the first thing to go.
Teenagers.
See, you're not buying that. I can tell you.
Teenagers.
If you answered yes to some of these questions, if you didn't know it already, you may have some hearing loss. If this is the case and you haven't done so already, it might be time to go see a doctor and get your hearing checked. And depending on the results, it might be time to get some hearing aids or a cochlear implant. I didn't ask here how many people here have gone through that phase already, if you have hearing aids or cochlear implant or been to the doctor. But if any of these questions make sense to you, it might be time for you to go take a look at that. If you know somebody, here's the tough part. If you know somebody that falls into this category, you're gonna have a tough time convincing them that they have some hearing aids. If you're not sure, if you're somebody that's on the fence and you're not sure you fall into this category, have somebody you know real well answer these questions for you. And they'll tell you the straight truth. They'll tell you, whether or not you're doing these things. Before I talk about hearing aids, I'd like to talk about cochlear implants just very briefly. That's something that a lot of us have curiosity about. Cochlear implants are primarily for people who have a lot of hearing. They're for people who have moderate to profound hearing loss. People who have mild to moderate levels of hearing loss, as is measured on your audiogram, are typically good candidates for hearing aids, and most doctors are going to recommend hearing aids for them. Cochlear implants don't work the same as hearing aids. A cochlear implant captures the sound and sends it directly to your inner ear. Maybe I should ask, does anybody here have a cochlear implant by any chance? Hearing aids take the sound, they amplify it, and they shoot it through your ear after it gets loud. They don't work the same. A doctor will tell you whether or not you're a good candidate for cochlear implant. They're better than they used to be. They're much more reliable than they were years ago. But of course, it's a medical procedure. There's always the possibility of complications. If you go in for that kind of procedure, there's always that kind of possibility. You should know about it things. But they're much more reliable than they used to be. And the good news is, for me, at least, because I'm still considering, I still have only hearing aids, that you can have the procedure done at any age. You can be 95 years old, and if your doctor recommends a cochlear implant, they can still do that for you. Also, another bit of good news about cochlear implants is, even though hearing aids are not covered by insurance, unless you maybe have Medicaid, cochlear implants are covered by insurance as long as your physician recommends them. If your doctor says that you have enough hearing loss that cochlear implant is advisable, then in most cases they'll cover a cochlear implant, which is good because they're over $100,000 a piece to have the procedure. So if you want to have that done, if your doctor recommends it, you can have that done. And I've had people in my sessions that have cochlear implants. Most of them are happy with it after they have it. There's always some people who don't. We have to, that's a personal decision. Mine is still to have the hearing aids. I would probably qualify for cochlear implant if I wanted one, but my wife and I have discussed it over the years, and so far I still want to go just with the hearing aids. I like being able to take them out, set them down, and it's done. That's it. I take them out, he's done. It's quiet. When I was a school teacher, I got to tell you, when I was still a school teacher, when I took my hearing aids, you take them out, the kids have no idea. It's all done. If you think you may need hearing aids and you don't have them yet, it's time to go see a doctor. If you haven't done that already, you don't have to see a doctor. But sometimes there's complications that are associated or parallel with hearing loss. So you want to make sure that there's nothing else an issue. You want to get that covered and make sure that's not a problem. If you've already done that, or if you don't want to deal with all that, you can still go directly to a retailer and just go straight to somebody that sells hearing aids. Trust me on this, they'll all give you a hearing test for free. I never charge you for it. You go in there, you can go to 5 of them, all in one afternoon, they'll all give you a free hearing test. There's some pluses and minuses to wearing hearing aids. I wear hearing aids, so I've obviously decided that pluses were better than the minuses. But let's talk about the cons first. First off, if you're wearing hearing aids, you have to, well, they're kind of a hassle sometimes. You can't get them wet. You have to buy batteries. You have to change the batteries. You have to remember to change the batteries. I carry extra batteries around in case one dies when I'm running around, so I carry extra batteries. And hearing is a lot like your vision. I wear glasses. I have contacts in today, but I wear glasses. My vision changes over time. Every year or two, I have to go. In fact, for eyeglasses, they won't even let you keep buying the same glasses. Every year you have to go get another doctor's visit if you want another pair of glasses because your eyes change. Your hearing is the same way. Your hearing will change over time. Certain frequencies you lose more often than others. You have to keep going back to the doctor to get your hearing checked, and then have your hearing aids adjusted accordingly. If you're not doing that, if you've had your hearing aids for 4 years and you haven't been to your doctor, you should go back and have them adjusted because they'll help you, because your hearing has changed in the last 4 years. Hearing aids don't solve all your problems for you. I gotta tell you, if I go into a noisy environment, if I leave the window down in the car, if there's a lot of background noise, road traffic, machinery, if I go into a loud auditorium, a lot of people, into a restaurant, all these situations, if it's loud and noisy, you might as well take them out. Because if you have a lot of hearing loss, it's amplifying all those pitches so high, it's difficult to hear. There's some hearing aids that are better than others, and in some situations you can adjust your hearing aids. But in some situations, they're just not a lot of benefit. On the other hand, you see I'm still wearing hearing aids. Well, you probably can't see them. I have them in here. I'm confessing to wearing hearing aids. They're right here. On the other hand, they do help in a lot of situations. For me, especially at home. In my life, in my home, I have a quiet home. My wife and I are usually there, just the two of us by ourselves. It's quiet. A quiet environment is good for hearing aids. This environment in here, this is wonderful for somebody with hearing aids because it's quiet right now. They've affected my life. They've helped us. I can talk to my wife. The distance from here to the front row, if I'm sitting in my own home without my hearing aids and I can't hear her, now with hearing aids, I can talk to my wife. For me, it's worth it. All that being said, they're your ears. It's your choice. It's your hearing. It's your money. It's your life. If you don't want hearing aids, I really believe this, it's up to you whether or not you want to wear hearing aids. There's going to be a lot of people who will have advice on this, on whether or not you should have hearing aids, and some of them will tell you. But it's up to you. I really feel strongly about that. But for me, it's worth it. So I wear hearing aids. And the thing about hearing aids and hearing loss is our hearing loss is the most problematic when we're trying to communicate. Sure, I can't hear the crickets and I can't hear the birds. Well, that's sad. I mean, that's really not the thing. The thing is we can't communicate. We have difficult times ordering food at the restaurant. We have difficult times talking to our grandchildren, our wife, our spouse, our neighbors, the people we work with. Hearing aids are about communication. Hearing aids are designed specifically to understand human speech. That's what they're designed for. So I'd like to give you a personal experience I had with my hearing aids that's worth mentioning. Because I was in denial. You know, I went through some typical stages. First I went through denial for over a decade. Then after that, I had depression when I started really believing it was happening. And I was angry and frustrated. Back to depression a couple times for some of them before I got to acceptance. It took me a long time before I went in and finally got some hearing aids. Because it took me so long, my brain had forgotten how to interpret speech. My brain had to relearn how to understand human speech. When I went back 3 months later and I said, they're making all kinds of noise. I can hear everything, but I can't understand anybody talking. The gal said to me, well, you have severe hearing loss, and you went a long time without having hearing loss. And then they gave me some exercises to do if I wanted to, reading out loud from a book and some other things, because my brain forgot how to interpret speech. So if you're on the fence, you know, I'm not saying you have to get hearing aids or you even need to get hearing aids, but if you think you're going to end up with hearing aids, you want to go get them. And there's a difference between brands and manufacturers of hearing aids. I want to point that out too. Let's go over the brutal parts of hearing aids. You know, you have to pay for these suckers. They cost somewhere between $1,500 and upwards to $5,000, $6,000, sometimes $7,000 for a good pair of hearing aids that have all the features. You know, you might not be able to get the best pair at the beginning. If you get a pair of hearing aids at the beginning, when you first realize you have hearing loss, you'll be able to adapt to those hearing aids quicker. You won't go through the same experience that I went through. So if you have the financial means, there are some differences between hearing aid manufacturers. If you have the means and the wherewithal to do it, get yourself a better pair. If you don't, like I didn't, go get yourself a lesser quality pair for less money and use those for a while to at least get used to plugging these things in your ears. Get accustomed to buying batteries and all the things, learn how to do it, and you won't be harming yourself further by not interpreting speech. Your brain will not continue to shut down and start learning. So get it as soon as you can. And I'd like to also suggest, again, I'm not going to quiz you on who has hearing aids and who doesn't, but the next time you go to buy hearing aids, I want you to consider a couple of these things. I didn't know when I first started wearing hearing aids that hearing aids are a marketable, high expense item, kind of like buying a car. They're a high investment item. And I discovered later on that my hearing aids, I wear Starkey now. There's many brands. I'm not recommending Starkey or any other brand specifically. The ones I have, if you buy them from this guy down the street over here, they cost $3,000. And if you buy them from this fellow down here, they cost $6,000. For the exact same pair of hearing aids. So if you're shopping for hearing aids, do just that. If I go to buy a car, I price shop a little bit. I look online. I research. So you could research about what kinds of hearing aids there are out there. What are the features on the hearing aids? What do they cost? Then you can pick up the phone, dial it, and say, how much you charge for a Starkey or Phonak hearing aids? What is your price range? You know, if they don't tell you, that's probably a sign of something. You can price shop once you know which one or two brands you want to settle on. And do some research. Find out about hearing aids. I learn something new about hearing aids almost every day. I only have one pair from one manufacturer, and there's so many different kinds and so many different features. Before you go in to buy your hearing aids, research. Talk to people you know who may have hearing aids. Go to the library. Look online. There's lots of information. Learn about your ears. Learn about how the ear works. Learn about the features. Find out what's good for you. And you know, even though I just pointed out that some hearing aids cost more than others, that doesn't necessarily mean that a $5,000 pair of hearing aids is better than a $4,000 pair of hearing aids. Because just like a fine bottle of wine, price is not determined exactly the quality that's in your hearing aids. And we each have our preferences. I don't carry one of those, I call them fancy phones, you know, the iPhone, the smartphone, the thing that you can do everything with, you know, makes toast and, you know, drives your car. If you have one of those things, many hearing aids come with features that sync with your smartphone. If you like that kind of technology, buy yourself a pair of hearing aids that will sync with your smartphone. You can do those sort of things. There's all kinds of things that those phones do for hearing aids. So shop and find something that you like. If you're like me and you're a technophobe, I've got a flip phone that I got from Walmart for $19.95. It flips open, and the only feature I have on my phone is one that I can set that changes the way sound is emitted from the speaker. So I have a setting on my phone that says I'm using a hearing aid, I push this button, and my hearing aid is supposed to receive that sound a little bit better. Some phones sync with your cell phone, or some phones sync with your hearing aids, and some hearing aids sync with your cell phone, and there are certain features you can do with your computer with a lot of different kinds of hearing aids. Find out what will work for you. So shop a little bit is all I'm saying. Don't buy the first pair that somebody tries to sell you, because just like walking onto a car lot, What they have is what they're going to try to sell. In my personal experience, I've been to several different hearing aid dispensers, retailers over the last 6 or 7 years. My best experience has been with an audiologist who carries several brands of hearing aids. So I have a choice when I go in there. If you go into some of these stores, they have one brand, and that's the best one there ever was. And if you leave today with hearing aids, it's going to be the ones that they sell. You know what I'm talking about? So if you go into somebody that has 3, 4, 5 different brands, like mine does, my audiologist has a half a dozen different kinds. My audiologist is deaf, and he himself wears hearing aids. To me, that means that his motivation just might be in the right place. Remember, these guys don't make a dime until they sell you something. So research, get referrals. See if you can get referred by somebody you know that trusts their hearing aid provider. Hearing aid is, once you put them in, we were talking about this earlier also, you become dependent on your hearing aids. And your hearing's going to change. You're going to have to keep going back. I follow, I don't know how many people here do the Facebook thing. It's not my favorite thing, but because I want to research, I go onto Facebook. And I'm in several groups for hearing loss. Several groups for the hearing impaired, the deaf, and hard of hearing. And there's forums, and they talk about their experience shopping, their experience looking for hearing aids, their experience going to work. Which, if you do the Facebook thing, I would advise pulling up some of these groups and taking a look at. And some of these groups, they'll tell you some of the amazing things that have happened to them with hearing aids. I guess all I'm saying is they're not all the same. Shop a little bit for your hearing aids. And no return policy. The first time I went to buy hearing aids, they told me I had 30 days to return my hearing aids if I didn't like them. Nobody can tell them 30 days if their hearing aids are going to work for them. 30 days is not enough time to decide if they're good for you. Find a hearing aid provider that will give you more than 30 days, give you a little bit of time. And no return policy. If you go to return your hearing aids and you go past the 30 days or whatever it is, you own them. It might have been $5,000, you might even borrow money for it, but you own them, they're yours. So know the return policy, and $300, $400, $500 usually each. Reshelving fee, they call it, if you return them. So, to me, if I had agreed to pay $5,000 for a pair of hearing aids, I had them for 2 months, and they still weren't doing a thing for me, I would pay the $400 fee to give them back and try a different brand, or a different retailer, or a different doctor. Because I've become so dependent on them, and I know what they do for me. So don't give up if you have a pair of hearing aids that aren't working for you. Be persistent. Find a different retailer, a different brand, a different doctor, whatever it is you have to do. Go do it. We have to be advocates for ourselves. Nobody will take care of us except for us. So go do it for yourself. Find a better pair. Find something that works for you. There's a lot of other things, thankfully, in recent years, recent years, it is recent years. 1990, ADA came out. 2008, the Americans with Disabilities Act was expanded. But it's only really the last 4 or 5 years that I've noticed a lot of things are changing for us that have hearing loss. A lot of things are going on. A lot of technology is coming out to help us. Now, some technology is for everybody that we can still use. But there's a lot of telephones out now, not just cell phones, landline phones. There's a lot of landline phones that have loud speakerphones. Speakerphone helps me out. I wait until nobody else is in the house, and I turn it all the way up. Even with my hearing aids, I have to have it turned up. And the speakerphone helps. There's a lot of programs out for us that can get us some of these things. ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, requires equal access to communications for us. So, here's the good news for us. If you use a landline phone, Does anybody here have a landline phone that's for hearing impaired? Anybody get it from the government? Nobody? Caption Call is as far as I know, it's a free program with no income limit, as far as I know. Caption Call will give you, it's a $500 telephone. It's landline. You have to have landline service. The speaker on it is so loud, the neighbors 3 doors down will hear it. Turn it on. And it's got a dial that's easy to control the volume up and down. And it's got a handset, if you don't want to use the speakerphone, that's exceedingly loud. And if you have internet service, you do not need to have a computer for this, but you do have to have internet service. The captions come across the screen that's about this big on the telephone. It's a very large screen, and the words are so big I can read them. So when you're talking with somebody, if you turn the captions feature on, every phone call is optional. You can turn the feature on and have the captions come up on the phone if you have a hard time hearing the other person. I love having captions. It works for me. I have a lot of hearing loss. The captions make a difference for me, not just on the phone, on the TV, on everything else. And it's free to anybody. They'll come in to your house, they bring the phone, they hook it up to your internet, they get it all set up. I've had mine for many years. Technically, if you get tired, you're supposed to give it back to them. It's on loan. But, you know, it's your phone. Clear Captions is a similar program for your smartphone. It also works on digital devices like your iPad. So if you go online or make a phone call to Clear Captions, these are all in our handouts. Some people don't have internet at home, so we provide phone numbers and contact information for these in our handouts. If you use a fancy phone, as I call them, and you want to have the captions, you call up the service and we hook it up so you can do that on your phone. They're currently working on a program for your personal computer, your laptop, not very many people have the ones with desktops anymore, but they'll work on those too. I called, it was just 3 weeks ago, because they're advertising that they have it, they still don't. But they're going to have the same program for the computer on your desk, your laptop. But right now, if all you carry is one of these things, you can already have the captions put on for you if you want to. Your television, every television made since 1994 has a closed caption option. How many people here use the captions on their TV? Anybody? A few people? If you don't, I recommend it. It takes a little while to get used to the captions. They're called closed captions on your TV because they don't show up unless you turn the feature on. Open captions means that the program shows the captions and you can't do anything about it. They're automatically on. But our television sets come with closed captions. And with closed captions, you push a couple buttons on your remote, the captions come up. As they're speaking the words on the TV, they come right across. It took me a few months. I've become a speed reading caption nut because now I can use captions too. Now I can't believe how fast I can read captions because I've been doing it for years. I can enjoy television much better because I have the captions. Assistive listening devices. I have this headset at home, and there's several different brands, so I'm not recommending one brand over another. It's up to you what brand you use. I get mine on the internet. I'm sure if you went into Best Buy, they would have them there too. I have a headset that is, I don't know if it's, some of them are radio controlled, some of them are infrared controlled. My headset is wireless, and it's got a dial on it, and it's so loud. It goes from 1 to 7, and I only turn it up to 3. Remember, I have severe hearing loss. It's so loud that I can hear everything on the television. And my headset, I can turn one ear louder or quieter than the other ear. You see, most of us, our ears are not even if we have hearing loss. For most of us, one ear is better than the other. If you're using a regular set of headsets, you're turning the volume all the way up so your bad ear can hear, and you're damaging your good ear, which is what I did to me. I had one bad ear for years, and I turned my headsets up so loud, my stereo was so loud, that one ear, my good ear, eventually because I didn't have those things. So if you have the means, you know, they're a little more expensive, a couple $100 probably for a pair of these. The person you're watching television at home with will appreciate it if you don't turn the TV all the way up. In my case, the neighbors appreciate it, but you're not turning the TV all the way up. So those are things that can help us at home. Alarm clocks.
Sorry, can I say one thing? If you're thinking about those, the headsets, they let him listen at the volume that's comfortable for him, while it still broadcasts into the room at the level that the others can hear. So it's very helpful that way.
Oh, so true. She has her own volume control with the television, and I have my separate volume control. This creates harmony with your loved one.
That's important.
Good point. Service dogs. I don't have one yet, but because we travel. With our mission, we travel from place to place in a camper. We live out of our camper, we go from church to church, civic groups and that sort of thing. Later on, when we settle down, I think I might get a service dog. Just like for the blind, for the hearing impaired, they have service dogs. The service dog will tell you when the phone rings, when the alarm clock goes off, when there's somebody at the door, when somebody calls your name, when somebody's approaching you from behind. In our world now, you can take them to work with you if you have to go to work. It used to be like that. They make a great companion. So if you don't have a pet right now, and you're thinking about one, consider a service dog if you have hearing loss, because they'll take care of you. They'll cover you from behind, I guess I'm saying. I want to have a service dog after I learn. I'm going to a convention tonight. That's primarily how we first got interested in coming to the area here. And you were so kind to invite us in here at the church. But we have this convention we're going to with an organization called ALDA, the Association for Late Deaf and Adults. The convention starts today in the evening and goes until Sunday. This group is for people like me who had hearing, but sometime in their life they lost their hearing. And of course we have our own unique challenges from somebody who never had hearing. Somebody who's born without hearing has plenty of challenges, and my heart goes out to them, but their challenges are different from our challenges, because in our world, we used to be able to hear. All our friends can hear, all our family can hear, and they look at us and they still think we can hear, but we can't. They just think we can. I don't know, where was I going with this?
All done.
What's that?
All done.
All done. So if you want to get more involved with hearing loss, it's all volunteers. The convention's this weekend here. If you think you might be interested, talk to me after the presentation. I'll tell you how to get involved with it. It's actually on the other side of town, right in Kansas, but I looked at it earlier. It's only a 25-minute drive from here. They'll have presentations on how to deal with stress related to hearing loss. They'll have presentations on sign language. There's author there that's going to speak on his book about hearing loss. They're going to have social events. So there'll be a whole bunch of people who can't hear all in a room at the same time. Think about 200 people in the room at one time, and none of us can hear. I can't wait, I'm so excited. It'll be like a Saturday Night Live skit. I mean, just think about that. And then, wait, this is the best. On Saturday night, they have karaoke, and none of us can hear. So if you're interested, ask me after the presentation, and I'll tell you about that. They're right here in town. And HLAA, the Hearing Loss Association of America, is the largest group that I know of that advocates for hearing loss, and they advocate and research for new technological advances. So if you're into technology and all these kinds of gizmos and things, fancy phones, headsets, stereos, loops for your hearing aids and all those kinds of things, this group does the research. There's a lot of doctors, audiologists that are part of this group. They also have an annual convention in a different city every year. They have an awesome website. If you're a computer person and you have the internet, they have an awesome website with loads of information that's helped me with my presentation, helped me with my hearing loss, that'll help you how to do things, where to find things if you have hearing loss. So I would recommend taking a look at them if you have the opportunity. Here now, I haven't done enough research yet. I want to do more. My hearing aids are made by a company called Starkey. There are many manufacturers of hearing aids. I'm not recommending one over the other. But I was able to get hearing aids. Originally, I had lesser hearing aids. They were less expensive. I got them for about $1,500. These are more expensive hearing aids. This program is for people who need a little financial help, a financial need for getting hearing aids. So they have an income ceiling based on your family size. You call, this is in our handout too. If you need hearing aids and you don't have the wherewithal for them, you call them up, they tell you what your maximum income is for your family, whether or not they'll cover you, and then you find a doctor that carries the same brand and is willing to give you the test, and then they give you a pair of hearing aids. It's called Hear Now, and it's for Starkey, and the contact information's in our handout. I suspect, but I have not yet researched, but I want to research. From these forums online, I think there's other brands of hearing aids that do the same thing. If you yourself, or if you know someone that has the financial need, if you can't afford hearing aids and you want to have them, or if they can't afford hearing aids and they want to have them, recommend they look into it, because that's how I was able to get started with hearing aids. And it may help some people you know, or even yourself. I'd like to talk about a couple of things to make life easier for you, communicating with other people with hearing loss. We were all, well, I shouldn't say that. I'm assuming we were all born with normal hearing. Most of us were born with normal hearing, and now we have less. So now we're still trying to cope with the world around us, who's a hearing world. And in addition to that, we think the same as when we could hear. So we need to adjust some things around us to make things easier for us that we don't really think about. So I did research on this. After I learned all these things, it seemed obvious to me. But until I read about them, I didn't do them. I didn't know. Start at home with your own house or where you live. It's probably too late if you own a home already. But if you're shopping for a home, you want to avoid these things. Avoid cathedral ceilings. Avoid hard surface floors. Avoid open floor plans. Because these three things just throw the sound around like you're sitting in a kettle drum, and it just bounces around and reverberates. If you have one of these homes, you can still modify that a little bit. You're there, most of your life is spent, your awake life is spent at home, and you have control over your home. Change things. Carpeting, the number one thing you can do for yourself is carpeting, because that does the most sound muffling reverberation, lowers the reverberation. Drapes are, everybody wants hard surface floors, because, they're easy to take care of and they look nice. But carpeting is great. Drapes work better than blinds, because drapes absorb sound. Upholstered furniture absorbs sound. Throw rugs, wall hangings, anything you can do to absorb the sound at home is going to help you communicate a little bit. It makes a big difference. When I walk into a home, I have many friends and relatives that have these kind of homes I'm describing with the hard surface floors and the cathedral ceilings. Forget it. I'm out of there. I just can't do it. And when I walk into a home that has these other features with carpeting and drapes, I think, well, I still can't hear, but at least I'm getting some of what you're saying. So change the acoustics in your home if you can. The kitchen. I hate kitchens. Ever since I have hearing loss, I hate kitchens. Okay, the kitchen is the worst room in the house where somebody has hearing aids or tinnitus. Some of you may have tinnitus. In the kitchen, there's almost always a hard surface floor. Then there's the kitchen table, the walls, the ceiling, pots and pans, appliances, running water, dishes and plates, banging, cleaning, glass. You know, in our home, we have a lot of plastic. I have plastic plates and plastic cups because when I set the thing down, it doesn't cling. You know, if you've got a lot of glass in a kitchen and there's 5 or 6 people in there and they're using, if you've got china plates and they're using their metal silverware on it, you know, with hearing aids, somebody wants to get up and they just want to run out of the room. You must know what I'm talking about. So use plastic, tablecloth. Works really great. You set the glass down on the glass table, bing. If you have a tablecloth, even a wood table, it's the same thing. If you have a tablecloth, that'll muffle the sound a little bit. A throw rug in the kitchen is not traditional, but it'll help you a little bit. Or drapes in the kitchen will help you a little bit. You know, if you have a floor plan where you eat a lot of meals in the kitchen, you might consider dining somewhere else. The kitchen appliances, think about how many different appliances run in the kitchen. If your wife is cooking your dinner, by the time she gets done, opening and shutting the oven, and the blender, and garbage disposer, and the sink running the water, I get up, I just...
The refrigerator is on.
What's that?
Even the refrigerator is on.
Oh yeah, the refrigerator, everything's running. So we have our meals in some other room. So if you have your meals in the kitchen, consider, you know, it's not traditional, but if you can hear the other person speaking, it might be worth it. Set your furniture up so that you can see the other person's face. I'm sitting here in the sun, you can see my face, you can see the mountain moving. If I sit with my head back this way, you would see a silhouette. And then all you would see is this round dark circle. And you wouldn't see my mouth moving, you wouldn't see my facial expressions anymore. So you want to sit in such a way so that you can see the other person. That means, in most cases, being 3 to 6 feet away from the other person. Those of you in the front row are all about 3 to 6 feet from me. You are getting the best sound from me today. Those of you in the second or further rows, you're getting less sound from me because it just sound goes like this. You are all watching my face, but you're each receiving a different amount of sound based on where you're sitting. You need to see the other person's face. So you want to have the living room window behind you so that the light and natural daylight is on the other person. Let them look into the sun. Otherwise, you're just going to see a silhouette. Lamps in the living room, you know, floor lamp, desk lamp, whatever it is, set it in such a way so that the light is on the person speaking to you if you have difficulty hearing. You know, if you have hearing loss, you do more lip reading, or now they call it speech reading, it's the same thing, lip reading, speech reading. If you have hearing loss, you lip read. Even if you don't know you're doing it, you are watching my face. In lip reading, and the reason they call it a speech reading now is because it's not really lip reading. Because when you're watching me from here all the way down to here. You're watching my body movements, my facial expressions, the way my hands are going. You're watching everything. The neck up is the most important, but you're still watching everything. And if you are hard of hearing, you're a better lip reader than you think you are. You've been learning for years. And you can learn to be a better lip reader if you want to. Focus on this other person's face, their lips. Watch their lips. You see, with lip reading, you have to learn to do that, even if you do it unintentionally. You're not going to get everything. The best lip readers, skilled, professional, some people get paid for it. You ever watch a football game and they're doing a lip, you watch a football game and the guy puts the card up in front of his face so the camera can't see his face. You see, everybody's lip reading. They just don't know it. But you only get about 40% of the words when you're lip reading. But 40% is a lot of words. If you're hard of hearing, you're probably getting less than 40% of the words said to say, I'm telling you. Because we get bits and pieces of sound and we add it all together. That's why we're so tired at the end of the day. This is what we do if we're hard of hearing. We can't hear consonants. We can't hear high-pitched sounds. S, P, D, B, C. Consonants are higher-pitched sounds. So because we lose higher-pitched frequencies first, we can't hear consonants. We hear vowels. Bud, dud, sud, mud. I don't know how many of you got that. I have no way of knowing how many of you got all four of those words. I know what they were because they came out of my mouth. But P, B, me, if you're lip reading, you're going to miss a lot of those. If you get 30 or 40%, it's a few words. Take it, and all you do get. So I would suggest you can watch TV to learn the lip reading. News broadcasts, talk shows, the camera focuses on the face. If you watch one of these new movies that's all technology and light shows, the camera zooms in and it zooms out and everything spins around. If you watch old TV shows or old movies or talk shows, you can watch the face. Learn to lip read, it will help you. We watch old movies at our house. I mean, it's not just because I like John Wayne. We watch old movies partly because I can see the actor's face. I can understand what's going on. So I use the headset, I use the captions, and I can see the actor's face, and I can enjoy it. I don't know, my level of hearing loss is different. Some of you may have more, most of you will probably have less. But do what you can to learn to lip read if you can. Plan ahead if you're going to social events. I don't know, does your church here have headsets at all? Do you guys have?
We have hearing system.
Are they radio controlled?
Pardon me?
Radio controlled?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you go someplace like church and you have a radio controlled headset, get there early so you can get a headset, and then sit where you can see the speaker's face, or the speaker's plural faces. In this, I don't know what you do with your church here. A lot of churches, it moves back and forth. You want to sit up in the front row if you have to keep going like this all day. You want to sit back so that you can see every speaker's face. If you go to a restaurant, the environment changes a little bit. You go to a restaurant, it's loud, it's noisy. Sit with your back against the wall. If you have hearing aids that can turn off some of your sound, like you were talking about earlier, certainly do that. Not all hearing aids do that. Sit with your back against the wall, preferably in the back or in the corner of the dining room. Away from the kitchen. Away from the busser. Away from the bar. Because if you're sitting with your back against the wall, you're only getting 50% as much sound coming at you. You only have to understand what's here. You don't have to worry about what's coming over here. If you can get a seat outside, as long as there's not a lot of road noise, a seat outside is usually pretty good.
Or wind.
Oh, wind, right. Yeah. Well, if you have hearing aids, we don't have to talk about wind, you know all about it. If you're in a noisy, harsh environment, give yourself a break. Nobody can do this for you. If you're in a noisy, loud, harsh, threatening environment, and you start feeling that stress come on you, get up and give yourself a break. Leave. I go outside sometimes. Typical example, Christmas party. I don't know anybody. Oh, hi, my name is blah, blah, blah. Oh, you have to meet so-and-so. Oh, here's so-and-so. And there's Christmas music going, and everybody's talking, and the plates are clanging. You know, this is exhausting. Normal communication in a quiet room is tiring for the hearing impaired. If you're in a noisy environment, it's very stressful. If you get to that point, before you snap, before you get frustrated, give yourself a break, go away for a minute. Excuse yourself if you can. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. I'm sorry, excuse me, I need to take a break for a minute, and I go outside. If you can't do it, don't do it. But if you can, then come back after you relax a little bit, come back in, you'll be in a better position to talk. You know, people can't see my hearing loss. They make hearing aids now so that nobody can see it because we're so vain, we don't want anybody to see our hearing aids. You know, if we had these big things that look like this on our ears, we'd probably be better off because then they could see we can't hear. They can't see hearing loss. They don't know the common symptoms of hearing loss. So you have to tell them. I use different words depending on my mood. I'm hard of hearing. Sometimes it doesn't make a dent. I'm hearing impaired. A little more often that makes a dent. I'm sorry, my ears are not good. I can't hear very good. I usually try to point to my ears. I don't know if that makes a difference or not. Sometimes I tell them 2 or 3 times. If you don't tell them, they have no way of knowing. If you do tell them, it still might not make a dent, because sometimes they just don't get it, right? They just, you tell them, they just don't get it. But give them a chance. Some people do get it, so give them a chance and tell them you can't hear. And it may make a difference, because it's up to us to tell them they can't see it. It's not their fault that I have hearing loss. And it's not their fault. They can't see it. I have to tell them. And after I tell them a couple times, then it's their fault. But at the beginning, it's not. They have no way of knowing. If you need to get better understanding, and this is tough in our culture. In our culture, it's rude to interrupt somebody. But if you're hard of hearing and you don't interrupt them, you might as well just leave. Because this is what happens. They start speaking to you in a noisy room or whatever it is, and they're at the beginning of the sentence, and you miss this chunk of the sentence. Now, your brain is aggressively fighting to understand what you just missed. What were the first words in that sentence? Usually it's that you don't even know they're talking. This person was speaking over here, and all of a sudden this person starts speaking. You spin your hand around. By the time you're looking at them, they're halfway through the sentence. You missed the first half. So now you're trying to figure out the first half of the sentence, and they're rambling on through, and they're on the third and fourth sentence, and you're still trying to figure out how they started. Stop them dead in their tracks. I know it's rude. If they get offended, I'm sorry. But I'm hard of hearing. I want to hear you. We want to hear you. Stop them dead in their tracks. I'm sorry. I'm hard of hearing. Could you please just slow down a little bit and repeat that for me? Or sometimes it's, my ears aren't good. I'm hard of hearing. What did you say again? Stop them when you can. If you can, you can. If you're a big crowd, sometimes you can. But if you're just 2 or 3 people, most people want you to be comfortable, and most people are not put off by these kinds of requests. So give them the benefit of the doubt and see what you can accomplish. If you live with somebody who's hard of hearing, or you know somebody who's hard of hearing,
Can you hear back there, Karen?
or if you are hearing impaired and you want to help yourself a little bit by letting others help you, here's some things, and this is on our handout too. If you want all this list to take with you, we have it for you. Here's some things you can teach people or instruct people, or people can do to help you understand them. So you're learning to control your environment a little. You're learning to defend yourself and advocate for yourself. So now, you want the other person to help a little bit too. So here's some things you can do just when you're talking to a person who's hard of hearing. The first thing is, if you're a hearing person speaking to someone who can't hear well, you want their attention first. You want them to know you're talking to them. That's the problem with this person speaking over here, and then all of a sudden she starts talking over here. By the time you get your head around, you start listening. If the deaf community that uses sign language, they have a whole system of gaining attention from the person before they begin signing. They'll wave like this, they tap you on the shoulder, they grab your hand, they tap on the desk. Get the other person's attention first before you begin speaking, because the beginning is what they usually miss. If you miss the beginning, I lost it. So get their attention. We are lip readers. If you're a hearing person, you don't have food in your mouth. Chewing gum, a cigarette, or whatever. Remove whatever it is from your mouth, because we're reading your lips. And if you've got something in your mouth, you're distorting that information for us. Hair, hands. If you're a person, some people are part Italian, they kind of talk this way. Sign language, I understand sign language. I'm a deaf person. I'm nearly deaf. So, but if you watch signers, people who know sign language, they sign down here so that they can still see each other's face, because they still use facial expressions to communicate. So you want to keep your hair and your face away, or your hair and your hands away from your face so that they can see you, because the face is a big part of our communication. We depend on that. Speak at a casual pace. I'm probably talking too quickly for some of us, but I wouldn't finish if I did. You don't need to speak so slowly that it distorts the sound. Because if we're lip reading, we're expecting normal facial expressions. If you change into something that's not normal, it's going to confuse us. If you're changing subjects, oh, sorry about the sound, I should probably.
No, that's better. It was like piercing my brain.
If you change subjects in the conversation, this is almost impossible to do. I don't know how to do it myself. But you know, if you've got a group of people and you're talking about one thing and all of a sudden you switch over to something else, the hearing impaired person is going to have this blank stare on their face sometimes because they didn't get the change. All of a sudden, says, "Oh, did you see Bob on Wednesday?" And then this other person's still thinking you're talking about the weather. We don't get it because if we didn't hear the first few words, we don't get it. So if you see a person's confused, here's another critical thing. Look for signs of comprehension on our face. We look confused. In fact, some people think we just look stupid. When we're not getting it, we look dazed or dazzled. Sometimes we stare at the floor. Sometimes we look up. Sometimes we just kind of look like this. If it looks like we're not following the conversation, we're not being rude. We just aren't getting it. You know, we phase out. When we can't keep up anymore, we just give up. We just give up. We just sit there. So if you want us back in the conversation, you have to say, "Oh, we're talking about Bob. Bob was over here Wednesday." And then I'll say, oh, good, thanks. I talked about the weather. And then we're relieved because we can follow from it. One person at a time speaking. I'm lip reading. I can't understand you and you at the same. I can't follow two persons' faces at the same time. One person speaks at a time. It sounds logical, but most people don't think about it. And the biggest thing is the background noise thing, especially if you have hearing aids. If you're talking with somebody who can't hear very well, turn the TV off, the stereo off, shut the door, close the window, move away from the dishwasher. Whatever you can do to make the environment quieter is going to help the person who can't hear. It's not going to be warm and fuzzy perfect for us. We can't hear no matter. But if you make the environment quieter, we can hear better. We'll get more. So today I've tried to talk about some things personal to me and my own personal experiences with hearing loss. We're just about out of time. We talked about things we can do for ourselves to make communication better. We talked about things somebody else can do to make communication better. I have some resources and handouts I'm going to give you. We know that we are not alone. 1 in 6 Americans, probably more than that. If you go to church on Sunday, more than 1 in 6 people probably that attend church have hearing loss. It's a big group of us. We are not alone. There's lots of us now. We need to start advocating for ourselves. That's the biggest thing, is we need to take care of ourselves. So at this point, we're just about out of time, and the sun's in all of our faces. Does anybody have, I'm still new at this, I look for feedback. Also, comments or suggestions. Is there anything here somebody'd like to add or ask?
I'd say the person thinks they have hearing loss, the first thing you should do is to see a doctor. Because when I was 30 years younger, I thought I'd lost my hearing. Well, definitely had, but the stapes in my ear had calcified, and so they put in new stapes in my inner ear. My hearing came back.
How old were you?
40-ish, 35, 40,
Very old.
when they're done. So see a doctor first.
And if you're driving your car and your wife won't hear anything you say, and you get upset and you say, "There's something wrong with you," it's because their left ear doesn't work anymore.
It did.
All right. Did everybody catch that last comment? All right. know what it was.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
We're torturing kids downstairs.
Four.
I used to referee football, and I refereed a game for the deaf school. And I thought, how's this gonna work? How am I gonna blow my whistle, and how they gonna know to stop and all that? And the coach said, don't you worry about it. And I did, and everything just went fine.
Well, you know, we can make our world better for ourselves. Sometimes we just have to have a little confidence
Yeah.
that things are gonna work out. All right, let's go have some problems and things. Thank you all for being here.